Clara Wren accepted the keys to the Pine Hollow Grange because the board needed someone steady enough to empty it without making the building feel ashamed. That was how the chair phrased it. Inventory the kitchen, sort the folding chairs, label anything useful. Prepare the hall for sale if no practical use could be found by the end of the month. Clara listened without flinching, signed the temporary access form, and took the ring of keys in one hand while Harbor leaned against her boot. The board chair said, "I know this is not much of a job." Clara said, "It is a job with keys." That answer was enough for both of them. She had retired from the Navy with a supply officer's respect for shelves, lists, and the quiet order that lets a room work under pressure. After retirement, she had applied to run a county community kitchen, then a warehouse program, then a small nonprofit tool room. Each place thanked her. Each place chose someone with more recent local history or fewer questions about old systems. Clara did not argue. She updated her notes, kept her boots clean, and took short contracts wherever a key ring needed a responsible hand. The Grange Hall stood at the edge of Pine Hollow, a white building with a green roof, tall windows, and a front ramp that had been repaired more than once by people who knew what they were doing. The sign over the door still read Pine Hollow Grange number 84, though the paint had cracked around the number. Inside, the main hall smelled of floor wax, folded metal chairs, coffee urns, and winter air trapped in old curtains. Harbor ignored all of it. He walked straight down the side aisle, through the swinging kitchen door, past the big sink, past the stacked pie plates, and into the pantry corner where 3 flour bins sat beneath a row of numbered hooks. Then he sat down and refused to leave. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway with the keys in her hand. The pantry was the least interesting part of the hall at first glance. Shelves of mismatched jars, a spice rack with labels written by 5 different hands, 2 enamel bins, 1 dented, 1 missing a scoop. The flour bins were empty but clean. Above them, 12 hooks were screwed into a board painted the same green as the roof. Each hook had a number beneath it from 1 to 12. A few held old aprons. One held a canvas bag with a faded sunflower on it. Harbor touched hook 7 with his nose. Clara said, "Of course you found a numbered system." The dog wagged once. She began inventory in the pantry because ignoring Harbor had never improved a day. Hook 1 held a blue apron. Hook 2 held nothing. Hook 3 held a twine loop with seed envelopes clipped together. Hook 4 held a wooden spoon with a tag tied to the handle. Hook 5 held an envelope of repair slips. Hook 6 held an apron with a pocket full of recipe cards. Hook 7 held the sunflower bag. Hook 8 held a ring of pantry keys that did not match any current lock. Hooks 9 through 12 were bare except for dust lines where objects had hung for years. Inside the sunflower bag, Clara found a calendar. It was 8 years old. Certain Tuesdays were circled in pencil, not every week, but often enough to show a pattern. Beside the circled dates were small marks: spoon, seed, hammer, jar, apron, chair. Sometimes 2 marks shared a date. Sometimes a name appeared beside a number: 7 Wren, 3 Holt, 5 Macy, 10 Open. Clara read the line with her own last name twice. Wren was not rare, but in a nearly empty Grange hall, under a numbered hook a dog had chosen, the word felt less like coincidence and more like a question waiting for its turn. She did not answer it yet. She photographed the calendar, placed it back in the bag, and kept inventory moving. The board wanted sale preparation, not an excavation. But every shelf in the pantry made the sale feel less straightforward. The recipe cards were not ordinary recipes. They had notes in the margins about batch sizes, borrowed pans, cost per serving, and who could teach the method without rushing. The seed envelopes were labeled with dates, row notes, and names of people who had taken starter packets. The repair slips listed chair legs, screen doors, pantry shelves, loose steps, and the person who could show someone else how to handle the repair next time. Harbor moved from hook to hook as Clara sorted, always returning to 7. By noon, Clara had a table covered with objects that did not belong in a simple clean-out: recipe cards, seed labels, repair slips, apron numbers, a calendar of Tuesdays, a folded seating chart with the words exchange table written across the top. The Grange had been more than a rental hall. The pantry had been its operating desk. The first visitor arrived while Clara was checking the kitchen outlets. A woman in a quilted vest opened the side door with a knock and the guilty expression of someone entering a building that was supposed to be unused. Harbor stood, sniffed once, and walked to hook 3. The woman stopped mid-apology. "You found the hooks," she said. Her name was Macy Holt, and she ran the garden stand on County Road. She had come to see whether any seed envelopes remained before the hall was emptied. Clara showed her hook 3. Macy placed one hand over the clipped envelopes and let out a breath. "I thought they had tossed these," Clara said. "Nothing is tossed until I know what it is." Macy looked at her, then at Harbor, then at the table covered in pantry evidence. "Tuesday exchange," she said. "That is what it was." The words made the calendar arrange itself in Clara's mind. Macy explained carefully, as if she had not told the story in years and did not want to overstate it. Twice a month, sometimes more in busy seasons, the Grange Hall opened on Tuesdays for practical exchange. Not a market, not a charity line, not a meeting that required speeches. Adults came with what they could teach, trade, repair, prepare, or pass along. The numbered hooks matched rotating stations: food prep, seeds, repairs, pantry restock, garden surplus, apron table, forms, chair crew, canning jars, kitchen tools, ride notes, open questions. Hook 7 had been the apron table. "Why Wren?" Clara asked. Macy pointed to the sunflower bag. "Your Aunt Lydia, if you are Clara Wren from the Lake Road Wrens." She ran aprons and first questions. Never let anyone hover at the door too long. Clara knew Aunt Lydia as a precise woman who mailed birthday cards early and kept tea towels folded like maps. She had never known about the Grange hooks. Lydia now lived in an apartment across the state and still answered the phone on the second ring. Clara made a note to call her, then continued listening. The Tuesday exchange had weakened when the roof needed repair, then the kitchen permit lapsed, then key holders moved, then people got used to doing without the room. The board saw low rentals and empty chairs. The exchange had been happening in pieces across porches, sheds, and phone calls, without the hall that once made it easy. Macy touched the calendar. We were not organized enough to defend it when the sale came up. Clara understood that too well. Useful systems often disappeared because they were too busy working to describe themselves. That afternoon, Clara called the board chair and asked whether her temporary access allowed historical inventory. The chair said, "If it does not break anything or cost money, yes." Clara looked at Harbor sitting under hook 7. "It may cost dust," she said. She spent the next 3 days cataloging the pantry. Harbor made the work slower and better. He found recipe cards behind the flour bin. He pawed gently at a loose baseboard until Clara discovered a row of jar tags tied in bundles. He sat beside visitors who came after Macy quietly spread the word. A retired carpenter brought a tin of hook numbers. A farm cook brought a stack of apron patterns. A bookkeeper brought old exchange tally sheets that recorded items moved, hours taught, and repairs completed without naming anyone's private reasons. The tally sheets mattered most. They showed the Grange had not been empty in any meaningful sense. It had coordinated meals prepared in shared batches, seed starts for garden plots, simple repairs taught at the side table, extra jars returned clean, ride notes matched, and surplus produce distributed through ordinary routes. No one had made a spectacle of it. That was why the numbers had slipped from memory. Clara copied everything into a clean ledger. She did not call it a rescue plan. She called it Pantry Inventory, Phase 2. The words helped skeptical people stay in the room. On Friday, she called Aunt Lydia. Lydia answered on the second ring. "You found hook 7, she said before Clara finished explaining. Clara looked at Harbor. "This town has a communication problem," she said. Lydia laughed softly. "We had a communication system. It appears to be in your pantry." The sunflower bag had been Lydia's. Hook 7 was where new arrivals brought questions that did not fit the other hooks. Someone might need to learn how to cook for one. Someone might need a ride to a job start. Someone might have a broken screen door. Too many zucchini. No idea how to fill out a vendor form or a skill they were embarrassed to offer because they were not sure it counted. Lydia wore the sunflower apron and sent them to the right table. "I did not solve much," Lydia said. "I just kept people from leaving before they found the person who could." That sentence went into Clara's notes exactly. The board chair stopped by on Monday to see why the side parking lot had cars in it. Clara had expected concern and prepared a simple answer. She walked him through the pantry table. Recipe cards in sleeves, seed envelopes sorted by date, repair slips matched to hook numbers, calendar pages with Tuesday marks, tally sheets copied, visitor statements clipped by topic. He listened with his hands in his coat pockets, eyes moving from object to object. "I thought people stopped using the hall," he said. Clara said, "People stopped using the rental form." That was not a criticism, it was a correction, and he accepted it that way. The sale was not canceled, not yet. The board had bills, insurance, a roof loan, and a building that could not survive on memories. Clara understood ledgers. Affection could not pay the light bill. If the Grange had a future, it needed a working schedule, accountable keys, clean records, and enough activity to justify itself without leaning on nostalgia. So Clara proposed one test Tuesday, not a grand reopening, not a fundraiser. A test of the old exchange table with modern records and practical limits. 4 hours, 6 stations, pantry hooks 1 through 6 only, plus hook 7 for questions. No speeches, no performance. Every item logged by category. Every volunteer assigned a station. Every visitor greeted without being asked to explain more than the task required. The board chair asked whether she could organize that in a week. Clara glanced at Harbor, who was asleep under hook 7 like a creature with union protections. Yes, she said. The week became a controlled storm of ordinary work. Macy took seeds. Ray from the diner took food prep. Jonah the carpenter took repairs. Lydia from the sewing room took aprons and mending. Paul the bookkeeper took forms. The board chair surprised everyone by taking chair crew and floor setup. Clara took records. Harbor took hook 7. They cleaned without polishing the hall into something unfamiliar. The floor was swept. The kitchen counters were sanitized. The flour bins were washed and labeled. The old aprons were laundered. The hooks were tightened. A long table went in the center of the hall with brown paper rolled across it. At the top of the paper, Clara wrote Tuesday exchange. Useful items only, clean records, quiet questions welcome. Macy objected to useful items only. Kindness is useful, she said. Clara added kindness must come with a task. Macy agreed. Aunt Lydia mailed the sunflower apron by express post, along with a note that said Harbor will know who needs hook 7. Clara opened the package at the pantry table and held the apron up. It smelled faintly of lavender soap and old cotton. The pocket held 3 blank question cards, a pencil, and a tiny measuring tape. Harbor sniffed the apron and wagged so hard his whole body shifted. On Tuesday morning, Clara unlocked the Grange at 8. The exchange began at 10. By 9:15, 4 people had arrived early with jars, seed packets, a cracked chair, and a stack of recipe cards. Clara let them in because a system should honor readiness. She gave them station cards and asked them to write what they brought, what they needed, and what they could teach if asked. The first official visitor stood at the door at 10:03 and nearly turned around. Harbor saw it before Clara did. He walked from hook 7 to the door and sat beside the visitor, not blocking, just accompanying. The man held a paper bag full of cabinet hinges. He said he had extras and did not know if that counted. Clara looked at the repair table. Hinges count, she said. Jonah found 3 matches for pending repair slips before noon. The next visitor brought squash and left with freezer labels. Another brought clean jars and learned which ones were safe for dry pantry storage and which should become flour jars. A woman who had been making soup at home learned the shared kitchen schedule from Ray and took a recipe card scaled for 12 portions. A man with careful handwriting helped Paul rewrite a confusing vendor form into plain steps. Lydia measured aprons for 2 adults who wanted to help at future food prep days, but did not want to be in charge of anything yet. Harbor moved constantly but never randomly. He led hesitant people to hook 7. He sat beside the repair slips when someone carried a broken chair part. He rested near the seed table when a visitor kept circling without choosing. He nudged the sunflower apron pocket when Clara forgot to refill question cards. The first test Tuesday logged more activity than 3 months of rental forms. Clara did not celebrate. She counted. 23 visitors. 14 useful items received. 9 repairs matched. 7 seed starts claimed. 6 recipe cards copied. 5 clean jar bundles returned. 4 forms clarified. 3 ride notes matched. 2 adults scheduled to teach short sessions the following month. 1 question card that simply said, "I can sharpen garden tools. Does that help?" Clara pinned that card under hook 5. It helped by Thursday. The board met that evening in the main hall, using the same long table because Clara refused to move it twice. She presented the log, costs, volunteer hours, kitchen requirements, and a proposed Tuesday schedule. Twice a month through spring. Weekly in harvest season if records justified it. Pantry keys assigned by station. Hooks 1 through 12 restored gradually. No open-ended promises, no vague enthusiasm. Every exchange would answer 3 questions. What came in? What went out? What skill became easier for someone to use? The board treasurer studied the numbers. "This does not pay the roof loan," he said. "No," Clara said. "It shows the hall is worth making a payment plan for." That distinction mattered. She was not asking them to believe. She was asking them to measure the right thing. The board agreed to pause the sale for 60 days. Pine Hollow did not explode with joy. It made lists. That was better. Clara used the first morning of the pause to make the Grange prove itself to her all over again. She arrived before sunrise with a thermos, a box of blank index cards, and Harbor trotting beside her with the serious air of a dog reporting for inspection. She unlocked the side door, turned on the kitchen light, and stood in the pantry while the old refrigerator hummed awake. 12 hooks, 12 possible stations. One building that had been almost sold because nobody had translated use into records. She started with hook 1. The blue apron held 3 recipe cards in the pocket. Bean soup for 12, pie crust for 6, skillet bread for 4. Each card had a second card clipped behind it, not with ingredients, but with skills. Stretch a meal without watering it down. Use shared ovens. Clean as you go. Price portions honestly. Clara laid the cards on the table and wrote food prep, teaching cards, needs current kitchen schedule. Hook 2 was empty, but the dust line showed something rectangular had hung there for years. Harbor sniffed the board, then walked to the lower pantry shelf and tapped a metal recipe box with his paw. Inside were meal labels, freezer labels, and small cards that said made in shared kitchen. Hook 2 had not been empty. Its object had been misplaced. Clara labeled it prepared food records. Hook 3 held seed envelopes. Macy returned with a folder of planting notes and helped Clara sort them. The envelopes were not random extras. They were starter packets with plain instructions for adults learning to grow enough herbs, beans, tomatoes, or greens to sell a little, share a little, or simply make their own table easier. Each envelope listed who could answer questions without making the learner feel foolish. Hook 4, the wooden spoon, belonged to shared meals, not sit-down banquets, as Clara first guessed, but cooking swaps. Someone made broth. Someone chopped vegetables. Someone brought clean containers. Someone delivered portions along a route. Every task was small enough to accept without taking over a person's day. Hook 5 held repair slips. Jonah identified the handwriting of at least 4 people who used to teach simple fixes. Chair braces, porch screens, cabinet hinges, loose thresholds, wobbly tables. The slips had checkboxes for watch, try, and teach next, which Clara liked so much she copied them onto the new forms. Hook 6, the apron with recipe cards, turned out to be mending and work aprons. Lydia explained that people learned better when they wore an apron that could get flour, sawdust, thread, or soil on it without apology. A clean apron was welcome. A stained apron meant the person had stayed long enough to do something. Hook 7 was first questions. Lydia's old station, now Harbor's chosen post. Hook 8 had no object until Paul brought in a wooden cash box full of kitchen tool tags. Potato masher, roasting pan, stock pot, rolling pin, mixer bowl. Each tag had a checkout line and a return line. Tools could leave the hall, but only with a card that made return simple. Hook 9 was ride notes. Clara found the proof under the old stage, where a bulletin board had been stored face down. The back of it held blue slips with times, farm lanes, and initials. No destinations beyond what the driver needed. No personal explanations. Just enough information to get someone to a shift, appointment, workshop, or shared kitchen time. Hook 10 became garden surplus after Macy found the old green tags in a coffee can. Bring what is clean. Take what you can use. Log large quantities. Ask before leaving crates. Clara appreciated that last rule. Generosity without coordination could become a burden by noon. Hook 11 was quiet paperwork. Paul recognized it by the pale yellow cards tucked into the pantry key bag. Vendor forms, kitchen permits, small business registrations, lease questions, room requests. Each yellow card had a line at the top that read, plain words first. Hook 12 was open table. That was where the uncertain items had gone. A skill that did not yet have a station. A repair no one knew how to classify. A request that began with, I am not sure this counts. By the time Clara finished, she had a full map of the pantry system spread across the long table. It looked less like nostalgia and more like infrastructure. Food prep, prepared records, seeds, shared meals, repairs, aprons, first questions, tools, rides, surplus, paperwork, open table. Harbor walked along the table, sniffed Hook 7's card, and lay down underneath it. Clara said, your department is predictable. The dog closed his eyes. The second Tuesday was smaller than the first and more useful because the system had to work without novelty carrying it. Clara opened only 8 hooks. She wanted to see where pressure formed. Food prep filled first. Repairs filled second. Quiet paperwork filled faster than anyone expected. Paul sat at hook 11 from 10 until 2, translating forms into plain steps while Clara logged the types of questions. Vendor table, kitchen time, roadside sign permit, shared freezer agreement, tool checkout. At hook 12, a woman named June brought a stack of cloth scraps and said she could make pot holders but did not know whether anyone needed them. Ray from food prep walked over, touched the thickest scrap, and said hot pans needed them every Tuesday. Lydia showed June how to sew a hanging loop. By the end of the day, Hook 6 had a new subcard. Potholder making, useful for shared kitchen. That was the old exchange working properly. A skill moved from uncertain to useful without a speech. The third Tuesday exposed the first serious flaw. Too many people brought garden surplus and too few took it home. By 1 o'clock, the table held more greens, squash, and herbs than the kitchen could process. Macy looked embarrassed, which Clara refused to allow. The system had failed to set limits. The people had done exactly what the card invited. Clara stopped the table for 5 minutes, rewrote the Hook 10 card, and added 3 lines. Label quantity before placing. Large crates by arrangement. Unclaimed produce moves to shared meal prep at 2. Harbor lay beside the largest crate until it was moved to the right spot. The fourth Tuesday proved the correction. Surplus came in labeled. Shared meal prep took what it could handle. The rest went back with the people who brought it, not as rejection, but as planning for next time. Macy thanked Clara for making the rule plain. Clara thanked Macy for letting the rule be corrected without anyone turning it into a personal matter. At the end of each Tuesday, Clara posted a 1-page report on the sideboard, not names, categories. Items in, items out, skills taught, repairs matched, questions answered, costs, needed supplies, next corrections. The reports changed the way the board spoke about the hall. They stopped saying, maybe people will come, and started saying Hook 5 is over capacity. Hook 11 needs another table. Hook 10 requires crate limits. Food prep can support 1 paid workshop per month. Fax did what pleading could not. Hook 8 returned the next week as kitchen tools. Hook 9 became ride notes. Hook 10 became garden surplus. Hook 11 became quiet forms. Hook 12 became open table, which meant a person could bring a useful uncertainty and leave with a next step. Clara labeled each hook in pencil first. Permanent labels had to be earned by use. The pantry began to sound different. Flower bin lids opening, cards shuffling, apron ties being knotted, pencils scratching, jars clinking softly into crates, people greeting one another by task instead of by problem. Harbor's nails clicked from hook to hook as he made his rounds. One afternoon, Clara found a second calendar behind the pantry shelf, newer than Lydia's but older than the current year. Its Tuesday circles had grown sparse. In the margin, someone had written, "If Wren ever comes back, show her the hooks." Clara called Lydia again. "I did not know I was expected," Clara said. Lydia was quiet for a moment. Expected is too heavy a word. Hoped for, maybe. You were always good with shelves. Clara laughed, then stopped because the simple sentence moved more than she wanted it to. She had spent years being useful in rooms that never became hers. The Grange pantry was not offering sentiment. It was offering shelves, keys, a dog under Hook 7, and work no one had to translate for her. The earned twist arrived through the sale paperwork. The likely buyer had planned to turn the hall into private storage, but the contract had not yet been signed. When the buyer heard about the Tuesday exchange, he came to observe. His name was Nolan. He owned 3 storage buildings and a farm supply lot. Clara expected a polite inspection and prepared to defend the hall with records. Nolan arrived carrying a box of canning jars. "My first business cards were printed from Hook 12, he said. "I did not know the exchange was still here." Clara said it almost was not. Nolan placed the jars on the table and asked for the roof numbers. He did not offer to save the building. Clara would have disliked that. Instead, he proposed renting the back storage room for his overflow seed racks at a fair monthly rate, with public access blocked and the rent paid directly toward the roof loan. The hall would remain a hall. The back room would earn its keep. The board treasurer asked 12 questions. Nolan answered 11 and promised the 12th in writing by Friday. Clara respected him immediately. That rent, combined with Tuesday exchange donations, 2 paid kitchen workshops for adults, and a modest town maintenance grant the board had never applied for because the form looked worse than it was, gave the hall a realistic year. Paul helped with the grant form at Hook 11. Harbor slept under the table until Paul said the words supporting documentation, at which point the dog stood and walked to Clara's ledger. Paul took the hint and added the test Tuesday logs. The grant was approved in May. The sale was canceled in June. Canceling the sale did not make the Grange secure. Clara made sure everyone understood that. A canceled sale was a reprieve. A working hall was a responsibility. The roof loan still existed. Insurance still came due. Kitchen permits needed dates, signatures, and fees. The front ramp needed a weather seal. The pantry shelves needed better brackets if jars were going to keep arriving in serious numbers. So Clara built a year plan from the Hook reports. It had 3 columns: community use, earned income, maintenance. The board expected the first column to be longest. It was not. Earned income had more practical strength than anyone guessed. Paid kitchen workshops for adults who wanted to learn batch cooking. Modest rental of the back storage room. Tool checkout deposits returned when tools came back clean. Low-cost table fees for people testing goods through the open table after completing one exchange session. Printing fees for recipe cards when someone needed a set beyond the free starter copies. Community use stayed protected. The Tuesday exchange remained open. Question cards remained free. No one paid to ask where to begin. Clara drew that line in dark pencil and did not let anyone blur it. Harbor helped enforce the spirit of the line by sitting beside people who approached Hook 7 with empty hands. He had learned that empty hands often carried the heaviest hesitation. Clara would give the person a blank card and a pencil, then step back. Sometimes the card came back with a simple task. Need to learn big pot. Can mend aprons, have extra dill. Need chair leg shown once. Sometimes it came back blank and the person left after coffee. Clara logged that as welcome provided no next step. The board treasurer asked whether blank cards should count. Clara said yes. He asked why. Because the hall did what it promised, she said. It gave the person a place to begin, even if beginning meant waiting. The treasurer wrote that down. The back storage room rent changed the board's mood, but the Tuesday logs changed its spine. Members began taking stage and shift. The chair who once handed Clara the keys as if apologizing now arrived early to unfold tables. The treasurer took the deposit box and balanced it in public view. Macy trained 2 assistants for seed envelopes because Hook 3 had outgrown her alone. Paul created a plain words folder for Hook 11 so he could miss a Tuesday without the station collapsing. Clara insisted on that everywhere. A system that depends on one person is only a favor waiting to wear out. She trained backups for every hook. Ray taught food prep leads how to read the kitchen schedule. Lydia taught apron leads where to log mending needs. Jonah taught repair leads how to separate quick fixes from work that needed a professional. Macy taught seed leads to write dates, varieties, and honest expectations. Nolan, to everyone's surprise, became excellent at Hook 8 because he liked making sure tools came back clean and no one borrowed a stock pot without knowing its size. Harbor remained impossible to replace at Hook 7, but Clara created a human backup anyway. The backup's first rule was borrowed from Lydia. Do not ask for the whole story. Ask what object would help next. That rule saved a Tuesday in late June when a newcomer stood under the porch lamp after closing, holding a bent baking tray. Clara had already locked the pantry. Harbor saw the person through the glass and went to the side door. Clara opened it because rules exist to serve the work, not to make people stand outside with a tray. The newcomer said the tray was probably useless. Clara looked at Harbor. Harbor looked at Hook 7. They unlocked the pantry. Ray checked the tray and said it was too bent for baking, but perfect for carrying seed cups between tables. The newcomer left with a station card for the next Tuesday and a note that's tray repurposed, Hook 3. Clara logged the entry after closing. It became one of her favorite lines. Repurposed was a good word for a building, too. By then, Clara's temporary contract had become a hall steward position. The pay was part-time and honest. The duties were practical: manage keys, maintain pantry records, coordinate Tuesday exchange, track rentals, keep kitchen permits current, report repairs before they became expensive, train station leads, maintain Hook 7 question cards. Harbor was not listed in the contract, but the board minutes included a note that the dog had established operational presence. Clara framed that page in the pantry. Summer brought abundance and problems of the ordinary kind. Too many zucchini, not enough jar lids, 3 people who wanted to teach kitchen tool care on the same Tuesday, a freezer that needed a new seal, a ride note that sent someone to the wrong driveway because 2 farms shared a last name. Clara handled each problem with a card, a correction, and a record. The system became stronger when mistakes were logged without blame. The old calendar stayed under Hook 7, sleeved in plastic. Wistful Lydia's sunflower apron hung beside it, worn now by whoever greeted questions that day. Calm, sometimes Clara wore it, sometimes Macy did. Haha, once Nolan wore it while helping at the jar table because Harbor brought it to him and no one argued with the dog. Matter of fact, the apron was too small across the shoulders, but he made it work. Short pause, matter of fact, late July brought the hook that Clara had underestimated most. Curious Hook 12, the open table, became the place where people brought things that did not yet have a category. Calm, a stack of clean cardboard trays, a bundle of lavender, 3 hand-drawn price signs, a box of spare buttons, a notebook full of soup math. Matter of fact, A retired electrician's offer to explain extension cord safety for kitchen events. Short pause, curious. None of it looked central until Clara started tracing where the items went. Calm, the cardboard trays helped the seed table. The lavender became drawer sachets for the apron cabinet, and a small product test for the open table. Matter of fact, the price signs helped 2 food prep participants sell at the farm stand without rewriting numbers on scrap paper. The buttons saved 4 aprons. The soup math became a paid workshop. The safe talk prevented 3 bad setups before they could become expensive mistakes. Calm Hook 12 taught Clara that uncertainty was not waste. Wistful, it was material before sorting. Short pause, Calm Harbor loved Hook 12 because people approached it slowly. Matter of fact, he would stand near the table, tail low and friendly, then sit once the person placed their object down, curious. He never pawed at Hook 12 the way he did Hook 7. Calm, he seemed to understand that open questions needed room, not direction. Short pause, matter of fact, Clara added a new line to the station guide. Calm, do not classify too soon. Wistful, that line helped her as much as anyone. Melancholic, she had been classifying herself for years. Drawn out, too structured for the friendly eye jobs, too quiet for outreach, too experienced for entry roles, too new to town for local leadership. Calm, the Grange did not ask her to soften those edges into something easier to hire. Matter of fact, it used them. Calm, a ledger needed structure. A pantry needed quiet authority. A building with old systems needed someone willing to read before rearranging. Matter of fact, one Thursday, Aunt Lydia visited in person. Calm, Clara picked her up from the regional bus stop and drove her straight to the hall because Lydia said she did not want to rest before seeing whether the hooks were honest. Happy Harbor greeted her at the side door with the sunflower apron in his mouth. Wistful, Lydia took it, held it against her chest, and looked around the pantry with eyes that missed nothing. Short pause, matter of fact. You moved Hook 9, she said. Calm, the ride notes needed the sidewall, Clara said. Less traffic. Matter of fact, good, Lydia said. Took us 3 years to learn that. Short pause, calm, they walked station by station. Matter of fact, Lydia corrected 2 labels, praised none too loudly, and spent a long time at Hook 7 reading the blank question cards. Wistful, finally, she placed 1 card in the apron pocket and wrote, "The room works when people leave taller than they came in." Short pause, curious, Clara almost objected that taller was hard to measure. Pause, then she looked into the hall and saw Ray teaching the big pot, Nolan counting jar lids, Paul answering a form question without sighing, and Harbor sitting beside a visitor who had just placed an uncertain bundle on Hook 12. Calm, she let the cards stay. Calm, on the first Tuesday of August, every hook was in use. Matter of fact, food prep, seeds, repairs, pantry restock, mending forms, apron questions, kitchen tools, ride notes, garden surplus, quiet paperwork, open table. Calm, the hall did not feel crowded. It felt awake. Short pause. Calm, Clara stood at the pantry door and watched adults from station to station without anyone calling attention to what they lacked. Matter of fact, a woman left with 3 recipe cards and a plan to cook in the shared kitchen next week. A man brought sharpened pruning shears back with tags. Macy traded seed packets for jar labels. Jonah taught 2 people how to tighten chair legs on the Grange's oldest folding chairs. Paul sat with a vendor form and did not sigh once. Calm Harbor slept under Hook 7 until the door opened, then rose to greet the next hesitant visitor. Short pause, wistful. That visitor carried nothing. Melancholic, empty hands often made people look more uncertain than heavy ones. Calm, Clara reached for a blank card, but Harbor got there first. Matter of fact, he took one gently from the apron pocket and carried it to the visitor. Wistful. The visitor wrote, "I can make soup, but only if someone shows me the big pot." Short pause, Calm, Ray read the card and smiled. Matter of fact, big pot counts, she said. Calm, Clara logged the entry. Skill request, food prep, next step assigned. Hook 1. Calm, peace came to Clara in entries like that. Wistful, not as quiet exactly, because the Grange was noisy now in the best practical ways, but as a settling of purpose. Calm, keys on her belt. Ledger on the table. Dog under the hooks. Matter of fact, people arriving with small offerings and smaller questions, leaving with a next step they could carry. Short pause. Calm, at closing time, she walked the hall the way she had on the first day. Matter of fact, main floor swept, chairs stacked, kitchen counters clean, flower bins labeled. Hooks ready, calendar updated. Question cards refilled. Calm Harbor followed 1 step behind, then slipped into the pantry corner and sat beneath Hook 7. Short pause, wistful, Clara crouched beside him. "Calm, you found the job before I did," she said. Calm Harbor leaned his head into her shoulder. Pause. Outside, the Pine Hollow fields turned gold in the evening light. Matter of fact. The grain sign still had cracked paint around the number, but the porch lamp worked, the roof no longer leaked, and the side parking lot held the quiet evidence of people returning. Calm, no one had saved the hall with a speech. Matter of fact, they had saved it with recipe cards, seed envelopes, repair slips, numbered hooks, clean ledgers, and a dog who refused to leave the pantry corner. Calm, the next Tuesday, Clara unlocked the door before 9. Matter of fact, Harbor went straight to hook 7. The sunflower apron waited on its peg. The long table held brown paper, pencils, and blank cards. Matter of fact, Macy arrived with seed labels. Jonah arrived with a toolbox. Ray arrived with soup notes. Paul arrived with forms. Calm, Nolan arrived with jar lids and a written answer to a question no one remembered asking. Short pause. Matter of fact, Clara wrote the date at the top of the ledger. Calm, Tuesday, exchange open. Wistful. Then she looked around the hall that had nearly become storage and saw what the old system had known all along. Calm, a building does not need to be grand to hold a town together. Matter of fact, it needs a table, honest records, useful hooks, and someone at the pantry who knows how to help people find their first station without making them feel small. Short pause. Calm Harbor lifted his head as the door opened. Matter of fact, the first visitor stepped in holding a cracked chair brace in one hand and a packet of beans in the other. Happy Clara smiled, not because the day would be easy, but because the system knew where to begin. Calm, repair table for the brace, she said. Seed hook for the beans. Questions at 7 if you need anything else. Short pause. Calm. The visitor relaxed. Matter of fact, Harbor stood to lead the way. The Grange hall breathed in the smell of coffee, floor wax, clean jars, and fresh paper, and the Tuesday exchange began again, one useful object at a time.